The reason why we keep attracting very similar partners that actually don't serve us, and we're frustrated with that, is because our nervous systems are attempting to have a redo of a situation, a core infliction, a core pain that we experienced growing up, namely and usually with one of our primary or both of our primary caregivers, our mother and father. Mm-hmm. And we're attempting to have a redo so that we can close the loop on that trauma and be done with it and move on and expand and grow.
We're back, baby, with a brand new season of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. Join us each week as we have unfiltered conversations about how to transform your life. Our mission is to usher in a new era of spirituality where you don't have to be all love and light to live a life of alignment. Here, we honor all of it, the profound and the profane, the magic and the messy, and all things that make you human. So let's discuss the truth behind transformation and be unapologetic in our evolution. From manifestation to money, embodiment to energy, and all taboo topics, nothing is going to be off limits. Are you ready to live a life that feels just as good as it looks? Let's get fucking spiritual. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so excited to be bringing you this episode today, and I feel like I say that every time, but it's true because I am excited every single time, and we are back again with another intro before the intro. And that is because we filmed this episode, maybe 10, 11 months ago at this point. And I was rewatching the episode this morning and floored at just how timely it is with all that we've been talking about on the second season of this show. So today, what you can expect to learn from our incredible guest, Stefanos Sifandos. He is an amazing relationship expert, trauma-informed coach, all of the things, and you'll hear his intro here in just a few minutes as we dive into the episode. But you're learning about how to have better, more intimate relationships, but through the lens of nervous system regulation and somatic embodiment and releasing unprocessed emotions stuck in the body, which I just couldn't believe how timely this episode was going back and watching it, and being that we've been talking about that here on the podcast. And what is really beautiful about this episode is at the end of the episode, we kind of switched energies a bit, and Stefanos ends up coaching me about where I was at real time a year ago. And just speaking, basically the advice he gave me was about trusting, surrendering, opening in relationship, and how to create more space being in my feminine while really creating a business and doing all the things. And what is so beautiful about that is, now it's a year later. And as you guys know, and if you've listened to my story episode on episode 2, you'll know that that is the path that I walked for the last year. And after this episode was filmed, I ended up going deep on a journey of my own nervous system regulation, of releasing stored emotions, of somatics, and walking the feminine path. And I find it really interesting too, and I'd be interested to hear your takeaways and your view on this, but I've noticed even my energy now and bringing this to the podcast, I feel so incredibly different from where I'm at and the seat that I'm sitting versus where I was a year ago when I recorded this. So it's beautiful to be able to see and witness, and I want you to see and witness in real time the transformation that can occur when you create a regulated nervous system and when you create safety in the body. Because here's the thing, it's so hard to surrender and trust. We can't surrender or trust if there isn't safety in our own nervous system and in our body. It's really a prerequisite for being able to surrender to a relationship, to be able to surrender to trust the universe. And I really feel the truth in that after walking this path myself. So I'm really excited for you to get to dive in and receive the wisdom and Stefanos's beautiful transmissions on this episode, and also to get to see the nuance and the shifts in, what it's really like to have a regulated nervous system and how that can positively affect every single area of your life. And also, with this being timely, as you guys know, I've been talking about nervous system regulation on this podcast because it's been the foundation of the transformation that I've had in my life over the last year. And as things are timely, I am enrolling currently, as of today that this podcast comes out, in my 7-week program, Expand, all about how to expand your nervous system capacity, release stuck emotions, release unprocessed emotions stuck in your body, and how to somatically embody and create safety in the body for the thing that you are calling in. So that could not be at a more perfect time. And if you are interested in joining us for those 7 weeks, go check out the show notes below for my program Expand. We are enrolling. We start in 2 weeks, and I hope to see you there. Now let's dive in to the episode.
Ladies, have you ever wanted to understand your man better in a deeper way? Do you want to attract deep and fulfilling relationships? And do you wonder, why do I keep attracting the same things over and over and over again? I'm so excited for us to dive into this episode today. We have a trauma-informed relationships expert with us, and he helps women and men create fulfilling and deep, lasting relationships in their lives. And I'm so excited to have him with us today. Stefanos, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so glad to have you. So I've been studying your work a bit, and we have a lot of mutual friends here, and I've gotten the pleasure of starting to get to know a lot of the work that it is that you do. And I've heard your story a bit, and I'd love for you to share how you got into doing the work in relationship coaching that you do today.
I think I started very young, when I was a little child, and it started because of the environment that I grew up in, and it was one of those environments where, and there are many children that share very similar stories to this, where there was enmeshment with my mother, which means my mother's unmet emotional needs were projected unconsciously onto me because of the relationship my mother and my father had together, which wasn't healthy, and it was really quite toxic and very volatile and very extreme, which leaked out into the family unit as well, myself and my younger brother. And I just wanted peace in the house. And so, I became a peacemaker or a negotiator or someone that could weave in and out of challenge and difficulty and pain pretty well, right? Or at least I would try. And I wanted to try and control the environment and control my mother and father, not in a way that would hurt them, in a way that just wouldn't hurt me. And so I would placate or do things that would maybe have them not fight and not argue and not be volatile and violent with each other, right, and with us. And so I started understanding relationship dynamics from a very, very young age, particularly when my brother came into the scene when he was born when I was about 5. Yeah. Things really, really changed then. And this isn't, me blaming my brother or my parents for having another child. I mean, I'm so grateful that I have a younger brother. And we have a beautiful relationship now as adults particularly. But it was just very difficult for me navigating that life. And I had to become adept to survive. So I had to understand relationships and relationship dynamics from a very young age and understand psychology and the mind, unknowingly, of course. It wasn't like I was 6 years old and thinking about these things. Yeah. But I was adapting and adjusting to my environment, right? And that really laid the foundations for me being very curious about human behavior and very curious about the human condition and trauma and pain and suffering and violence and destitute and poverty and famine and why some people are really wealthy and some people are not, why some people dying of disease and other people can just walk to a hospital. Like I couldn't understand. I became very, existential from a young age, asking really big questions. And so it was really that pain that I experienced growing up that propelled me to look towards understanding and mastering relationships in a deeper way for myself and for others. And I learned as well, like if I could these are just some learned patterns and behaviors, giving you some insight into how sort of my mind works. Yeah. I figured out if I could help people, i.e., help my mum and my dad, help my mum not feel so sad, help my dad not be so angry, then I would be of value. Right. And so therein came this codependent thread, this external validation, needing others to see me in a particular way so that I would feel worthy.
Yeah.
And so that carried on through my teenage years, that carried on through my life. I remember being a child and not really having a lot of friends. Greek was my first language. And I had some, I don't want to say learning disabilities, but I guess am neurodivergent and some very mild dyslexia, coupled with English not being my first language. Coming back to Australia, around the age of 6, I couldn't speak English and I struggled to make friends, and that sort of carried through for quite some time into my teens, I guess into my sort of mid-teens. And I just figured that if I can, gift people gifts and make them a priority, then they may include me in their friendship circles. You know? So it was a pretty volatile time growing up, with home and school, with bullying, with not fitting in, with feeling isolated. And again, it just led me to, I want to understand, how can I be better at relationships? I made it about me, not in a selfish way, but in a sense that it's my fault. I played the victim, right? Like, this must be my fault. How can I make myself better?
Yeah.
And what can I do to make, people like me? And so that was this thread. And I'll probably pause there because it obviously goes on. But that laid the foundation for this enthralled, I guess, attention that I pay to relationships and people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So it sounds like you were really initiated into this work at a young age, and now you found yourself teaching it. And from the story that I've heard too, of like, you've been through a lot in your life and in your past, and now you've got a beautiful wife and child, and now you teach this with other people. And so what do you find, like, when people are coming to you, what are some of the things that you find in relationship dynamics that people really need help and support with?
There's a number of things, from sexual intimacy to opening up and truth-telling in relationship, to asking for what we want, making requests, and really identifying our own needs in relationship, excitement and spontaneity, and ensuring that is still alive and fun and play in relationship. Communication, people often communicate from wounded and hurt places, and that causes others to react, and therefore what often happens is two people are just reacting to each other from a regressed state, from an old coping strategy that doesn't really work anymore, and that's known as a maladaptive coping strategy. Worked when you were younger, helped keep you safe, like shutting down helped keep you safe when you were younger so you wouldn't feel the pain and it wouldn't be so overwhelming as a small child. But when you shut down and or stonewall in relationship, it causes hurt and distance in adult intimate relationships. And so there's a lot of that. There's distraction that people come to me with. In other words, they're not able to focus on the relationship. And so when the relationship hits turbulence or difficulty or challenge, they look the other way. They look to other partners or potential partners. They look to, short-term gratification, food, adrenaline, drugs, sex, movies, numbing out. Like, I'll just focus on my work, you know? There's just this space that grows between people, and it's not a healthy space, like the space that we want to have where we can miss each other and appreciate each other. It's space that's forced by repressed trauma. So I see a lot of that, and probably the list goes on and on.
Yeah, for sure. And this is such a big area that people need and want help with. And I've found, I get the question sometimes with even my students and things like, I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel. I keep dating the same type of person. A lot of women, I keep dating the same type of guy. What would you say to women listening to this that are like, I swear I'm doing the work. I feel like I'm doing the work, but why does this keep showing up in my life in different flavors, the same person?
And that's a really good point. And let's not take that away from anyone that you're not doing the work.
Yeah.
Because you probably are doing the work. You probably are exploring the inner workings of your mind and your heart, and you're probably looking at some of your trauma. It doesn't even mean that you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You may be doing it wrong. Okay, that could be a possibility, but it may not even mean that. It may just mean that where you are in your journey is exactly where you are in your journey of unraveling. And it takes time, and it's not a time thing, it's an effort thing at the intersection of readiness, at the intersection of openness and willingness and ability to hold and be resilient and actually face our trauma and our unresolved wounds, right? And so the reason why we keep attracting very similar partners that actually don't serve us, and we're frustrated with that, is because our nervous systems are attempting to have a redo of a situation, a core infliction, a core pain that we experienced growing up, namely and usually with one of our primary or both of our primary caregivers, our mother and father. Mm-hmm. And we're attempting to have a redo so that we can close the loop on that trauma and be done with it and move on and expand and grow. Because that's one of the primary directives of being human, growth and expansion.
Yeah.
But we don't know that consciously. Mm-hmm. So we keep attracting very similar dynamics so that we can be different with them. So that instead of shutting down or getting angry and aggressive and projecting, we can actually pause. We can regulate our own nervous systems. We can ask questions and be curious. We can listen. We can be listened to. We can be witnessed, because often many of us just aren't witnessed. We're not seen. We're not loved. We're not appreciated. So the relationship dynamics is an opportunity for us to have those unmet needs met. But both people often don't know that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So what do? They just come from their old trauma.
Right.
They fight, or they create distance, they shut down, and eventually that's enough. And people are like, well, this relationship's not working, so we'll just leave.
Yeah.
Now, granted, some relationships need to finish. They need to be done with. But I believe that often relationships are done with too early, being defined by we actually don't grow and gain anything from it because we're unconscious to what's really happening underneath.
Yeah.
And so we have to do our inner work, and then we come back to that statement, but I am doing my inner work. Great. Can you do your inner work and meet yourself without shame and judgment that you're not doing your inner work or it's not moving fast enough?
Yeah.
Because that's a roadblock.
Yeah.
That creates rigidity and places you in a box that doesn't move. And now you're not moving. There's no momentum. So you're not actually growing from the place that you find yourself in. And you may have to switch up your techniques, and you may have to just be a little patient. You may have to learn how to regulate your nervous system and have your physiology in greater check so that you feel safer in your body to be able to explore some of these really big things that are giving you situations that you just don't want anymore.
Yeah.
So it is a learning process. We have a beautiful program, my wife and I, called Be the Queen, and we hit this roadblock, or the women in this program hit this roadblock massively all the time. And it is about healing those wounds from childhood, inner child work, somatic work, learning how to resource ourselves. It is about working with the mother-father relationship and how that translates symbolically to how we project our unconscious fears on the masculine or on the feminine, the collective. And we have to work with that. We have to deal with that. We have to learn to be safe in our own bodies first before we start to intellectualize our problems or our way out of our problems.
Yeah.
We have to learn how to... Trauma doesn't work. Trauma cannot be healed without our bodies feeling safe, which translates to parasympathetic nervous system response, being activated in times of stress, and learning how to navigate the complexity of this psychological, physiological space we find ourselves in when we are pushed to our edges, and learning how to deal with that in healthy ways.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's so true. And nervous system regulation has been a huge part of my work this past year. And I actually found that was the piece that I was missing. It's like I was all into subconscious reprogramming and I had courses on it and all these things. And it got me pretty far. And it's like, well, why can't I feel the success I've had? Or why can't I feel, why do I still feel like I'm blocking the intimacy or blocking the connection that I truly deeply could have? And it came down to really the nervous system piece. So I love that you bring that into this work. So if someone is listening to this right now and they're like, oh, I really resonate with, I keep attracting the same things, how can they begin to create an awareness? I heard you say like projecting your fears onto the masculine or the feminine. Like, how would someone know that they're even doing that? How can they begin to create an awareness of this kind of thing?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I think first, I'm going to go back and just add something to what you shared, which I think is really valuable, is that we're multifaceted beings.
Yeah.
And, the mindset work and the emotional regulation work and the retelling and rewriting of our internal stories and the belief work, all of that is valuable. I do not want to discount that. And the somatic work, the bodily work that we do is also super valuable. And often all of the other stuff is not useless. It's just not as impactful without the integration of physiology and body and regulation in that way as well.
Yeah, well said.
And so to answer your question, like how do you notice that, right? Firstly, it can be really wise to create space from dating and intimacy for a period of time and work on yourself from that place and start to elevate your self-worth. And your question was, how do we notice that we're attracting the same type of person?
You said something about like, I kind of wanted you to go into project. You said we project our fears.
How do we know
what does that mean, and how do we know we're doing that?
Sure, yeah. So if we find ourselves acting in very familiar ways in different relationships, and I'll give a couple of examples in a moment, that's a telltale sign that, of course, we're the common denominator, right, in our lives.
Yep.
Right? So that's a telltale sign that it's not about, it's not them, it's me, or it's me, or it's them, it's not me. It's not about that. In relationship, there's more than one. So it's a combination of each other, right? But if you're the common denominator and you're finding you're responding in very similar ways, we'll take jealousy as an example, right? Or envy as an example in relationship, which is actually quite common. Then there's maybe something within you that's unresolved that you're projecting onto that partnership. And so if there's tension, if there's anxiousness around your partner not calling you back after a couple of hours, and this is a common theme in your partnership, or that you need them to validate you in a particular way, or let them to communicate with you in a very particular way so that you feel safe. And there's nothing wrong with making requests, by the way, but if it gets to a point where you are dysregulated, it's telling you something about what's happening for you. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not telling you anything about what's happening with them and their behavior. Maybe their behavior is sporadic and erratic. Maybe you're attracting that, and that's a thing in your life. Maybe you're bringing that into your life to be able to deal with it in a different way, and or to stop actually attracting that, to recognize that. And so you're not attracting that anymore, and that's where the deeper healing comes in with self, right? And so creating space from partnership can be useful. In other words, don't be a serial dater. Don't keep dating. Don't keep being in and out of relationship. Create some space to get to know yourself in more profound ways. But when you're in a relationship and that's happening, and we can pull the thread of jealousy and envy again, or we can use another thread like bickering and tension. And abrasiveness in a relationship when your partner does something that you don't like, you want the dishes washed a particular way, or you want the bed made in the morning and they just don't want to do that, and that really, really triggers you. So maybe it's something that, and it's not that they're dirty people or they're not neat and clean, it's just they have different ways of doing things, but that causes both of you to actually have tension and bicker, and you're finding you're fighting over really silly things, and that ends up becoming a big thing, and that's how your relationships have ended, and that's a theme for you. Maybe symbolically, because symbolism is the oldest language we have access to, and it's the only language we have access to. Maybe symbolically what that means to you is something that happened when you were younger that really hurt you and triggered you. Maybe, you grew up in a messy household and there was chaos, or maybe just that symbolizes chaos to you and it really upsets you. Can you go deeper into that and not necessarily make it about them? And if you do make requests, the requests come from a different way, not from a judgmental space of you're dirty, or I want it this way, you have to do it this way, in a controlling place. Because whenever we're judged or controlled, we shut down. And then when we shut down, our reactive patterns come through. So now you've got two people like this. And so it's really just turning inwards and looking at self. That's the starting point.
So good. Awareness is always the first step. Right? And the willingness to go there. And I love what you said about creating the space. That's something that I've personally done in my life, and it's helped me tremendously in all other areas. And I'm still going through that. I'm like, personally, I'm not dating right now as I'm scaling my company and the podcast and all of these things. And it has created so much space for me to have my own energy to create. And when that time comes, I know that will change in my life. But I love that you give that advice for people. And as far as, so say, a woman she's like, okay, I hear you. I'm ready to create space, and I'm ready to start shifting. I'm ready to start healing. What can she do to begin actually healing those things? So like, okay, I know I have the memory. I know I have a relationship with my father that, was wounded, or I know I have these certain things. How can she now create the space, but what does she do actually to heal that part?
Well, we heal in the presence of others. We heal in the safe presence of others, I should say. So in other words, joining a sister circle or a group, working with a therapist or a coach or a somatic healer, or a somatic therapist, I should say, or an energy healer or a spiritual guide or a shaman, or whoever you want to work with that you trust and that you respect and that can see what you can't, because often we can't see the forest through the trees because we're in our stuff. And it's difficult to elevate to a 30,000 foot view, but others that have certain skills but also care deeply can do that for us.
Yeah.
They can't do it for us. They can support us in doing
Hold
it
the
for
space.
ourselves. Yeah,
Sure.
that's right. So that's a great starting point. Like I really recommend that. And I practice what I preach. I work with coaches. I work with guides. I work with spiritual healers. I work with various different people to help make me, I guess, a more robust, resilient, better human being, right? And that's also what I do in the world. And I think that's really important. I also think that being in one's own space, and so a healthy practice of stillness and silence and solitude is also really important too, to get to know yourself in deeper ways. We live in such a fast-paced society, right? We often don't make time or have time for ourselves, but for the various aspects of ourselves that we haven't met yet.
Yeah.
And I'm not speaking to the unhealthy parts of us or the wounded parts of us. I'm speaking to the exciting parts of us, the parts that have tremendous capacity to expand in deeper consciousness. And in silence and stillness and solitude, we get to meet those parts of us.
Yeah.
But we have to create the space for that, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, in terms of modalities, parts therapy, gestalt therapy, inner parts work, somatic work, breath work is part of somatic work. CBT can also be cognitive behavioral therapy can also be really interesting. There are so many different modalities out there. If you're willing and open, you'll research and you'll gravitate towards what really resonates for you. Psychedelic assisted therapy may be something that you're interested in as well. There are many modalities out there. I obviously caution any very deep, intense, extreme work, especially that involves external substances. And breathwork's part of that category, but it's not. I guess technically it is an external substance, but it's not, so to speak. But I just caution, move with deep respect in those places and spaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
With reverence. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to go into the breath work that you do as well with women. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah. So I've been practicing breath work myself for over 10 years. Over 10 years. This kind of breath work, I guess. And I've been teaching for maybe 8 or so years, around there. But really, for me, breathwork saved my life. Legitimately saved my life. I think I was on a path to suicide.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so I was in a really dark place in my life. One of very few, but really, really dark place. And a friend of mine said, "There's this traveling practitioner for somatic therapy and breathwork." And at that time, I had an idea of what it was, but I didn't quite know what it was. And I'd practiced a lot of yogic breathwork and ancient. I guess mystical kinds of breath work and kundalini yoga and so forth, but and pranayama, different forms of pranayama, but I never really understood this per se, or this expression of that, which is really taken from ancient practices anyway. And I just said, I was still willing and open, which was great. And I said, sure, man, I'll try anything, whatever. I was like, just slouch shoulders, I'll do it, whatever.
Yeah. Very
much in my victim and very much in pain, And so I went there and she met me. She was staying at a friend's house. I remember it was in Hamilton Hill, which is a suburb not far from Fremantle where I was at the time. I knocked on the door and she opened the door and she was just an angelic being. It's very interesting. I can see her face and I can see the white dress that she was wearing. It's a very long dress, but I actually can't remember her name. It's really strange. And I remember, it was almost like a dream. I remember aspects of it. And we went into this thing and she asked me to breathe in a particular way and we did some practices prior to, and I just released, I can't even tell you, it was just, I don't know what was coming out of me. I was wailing, I was crying, I was screaming, the visceral release I had was, I don't want to say unlike anything I've experienced before, similar but just very, very different under those circumstances. And I was far less now, but generally I'm definitely an introvert. I'm maybe an ambivert more than anything else, but I'm quite, was really quite shut down in that way. And just the openness and expression that I had was it moved something in me, and it not only moved something in me, it gave me perspective. I released something that had been stuck for a very long time, very deep pain. And I remember finishing our session, or finishing the breathwork component of our session, and just writing. I was just writing profusely. my hand was so much it was cramping. I wrote like 4 or 5 pages.
Wow.
I didn't even know what I was writing. And that was the only time I saw her. I don't know why I didn't see her again. It really feels like a dream. And I then somehow drove myself to the beach, to the ocean there, because Fremantle's on the ocean. And I sat on the sand for hours just looking at the sky, meeting the ocean. And I was just mesmerized. I didn't know what happened, but what it did was it took me from I'm on this path and I'm probably going to kill myself because I don't know what else to do to I don't think that's an option right now. What else is possible? So it was really beautiful, and I got very committed to the practice of that, and eventually, not immediately, but eventually they're not holding, because there was a couple of years after that, there was another sort of dark night of the soul that I went through, which was really a continuation of that. It was more like God gave me a reprieve and a pause for a moment, and then, I plummeted myself back in again. But then after that, I really opened up to teaching this, as one of the many modalities that I use in my practice, in my coaching practice. And breathwork for the feminine really is an extension of, I mentioned Be the Queen earlier. My wife and I started that program in 2019.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful program for women that are looking to date differently and also heal past wounds. And we teach it live, and we have a learn at your own pace program as well. We're actually in it right now. We're teaching live one right now. It's beautiful. And I thought to myself, I love this container, and I want to do more of this on a regular basis. So I'm like, you know what? I've been wanting to do more in-person work, which I do a fair amount of, but the last couple of years just naturally gravitated more online. And I thought, why don't I just do a monthly somatic immersion for women, and then maybe they may get something from that, and then of course progress into Be the Queen as well as an extension of that.
Yeah.
Right? And so I thought, well, I don't just want to do it in person. I like utility. I'm masculine in that way. So I'm like, well, why not do a live stream as well?
Yeah.
And so women from around the world can do it at the same time, and we'll be in a really powerful container together.
Yeah.
All of us, my wife as well, and thought this is going to be cool. So I live stream it, do it live, and everyone gets a recording as well. So if you miss it, and when you get the recording, it's like you're doing it live anyway. So yeah, and I just do that every month. And every month is a different theme. It's a 3-hour immersive. There are connected embodiment practices that we do.
Yeah.
There's breath work, and there's live coaching as well.
Briefly interrupting this episode to share with you my new group program called Expand. If you are someone who has listened to the podcasts, you've read the books, you've tried all of the things that they say to do, like mirror affirmations, journaling, hypnosis, you've done it all, and you consider yourself a very self-aware person, and then you keep wondering, why am I still stuck in the same patterns? If you resonate with this, I promise there is an answer. I felt very similarly to you until I found nervous system regulation and somatic embodiment work. So the thing is, no amount of subconscious reprogramming, journaling, or affirmations is going to outprogram a dysregulated nervous system. And until your body actually feels safe to hold the thing that you are calling in, you'll stay stuck on a loop, feeling like you are taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And I know that there is more out there for you. So if that resonates with you, I invite you to join my 7-week group program, where I'm going to take you through the nervous system regulation tools and techniques, the way to somatically process and release emotions stuck in your body that are keeping you stuck. And you'll be held in a group container that's intimate, and that you can actually apply these tools in real time and integrate them into your life. So we are actively enrolling in that now. We start on March 20th. So if this is calling you, definitely go check out the show notes below and come join us.
Breathwork for me has also been really, really powerful. And I think those women listening to this, or men, anyone listening to this, like what you spoke to of feeling those emotions and like all of those things coming up and releasing whatever was deeply stuck within you, that has been a huge key for me in my own practice of that somatic healing, the somatic work, and really can be the precursor to like the Be the Queen, like you said, of like, then okay, I'm releasing this, I'm clearing this. Now what am I available for to call in? What am I repatterning in my life? And so that's really beautiful. And as far as like what you teach after the fact, right? So if someone that's listening to this, well, I know what I don't want to do. I know that I'm releasing all this stuff. Well, what about the example of what I can step into? What does that look like? This be the queen archetype. How do you help women to step into that? What does that even look like for them in their life?
Yeah. So, I know this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Clearly, I'm not a woman. So, and also, even when I'm in men's work, I don't tell men what to do, and I don't claim to know what they should do.
Yeah.
I just offer a perspective that if it resonates with them enough to explore it, please do, know. And so really what I do with any human being that I'm working with is, I can come back to what I said a few moments ago around safety, is just really create a safe environment and a safe space for them to be able to explore areas of their lives that they haven't before to actually determine, I love what you said, around what's available to them, what can be available to them. So when I'm working with people, I'm helping them clear clutter of the past to create this cleaner, clearer vessel so that they can determine themselves what is available to them and what are they actually curious about, and actually get into a state of curiosity, because when we're in a sympathetic nervous system response, this constant subtle fight or flight, we can't be genuinely curious.
Yeah.
Because curiosity requires openness, conscientiousness, and we can't do that because we're stuck in a survival pattern. And so again, I'm really just supporting women, people, get out of that, feel safe in their bodies. And that's a journey, right? That's a journey arc. That is depending on the individual, where they're at, how severe their trauma response is, and how deeply entrenched they are in their patterns. There are so many variables that impact that, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately it's creating safety, clearing clutter of the past. And then once we do all that, and I can teach them and show them that it's possible for them to regulate their nervous system. So we'll go through a process of edging and taking them, expanding their window of tolerance. Once we're able to do that, then we can start genuinely dream weaving about what's available to them.
Yeah.
So I think in our society we get it. We reverse it. It's like, well, let me dream weave now. Let me let me plan and let me get into the goal orientation now. But we haven't done the foundational work to actually prepare us for those things that we actually desire.
Yeah, like let me manifest. Let me do all these things, and but it's really like the foundation of what you're clearing out and what it is that you're creating to be able to even hold what it is that you're calling in is really imperative.
Hold and receive.
Yeah.
Like people's worth is their perception of their worth and value is so fucking low that they can ask for $1 million or $1 billion or, a partner and 2 kids and a white picket fence or this business and that travel. But then when it comes to them, they can't receive it because there's this fundamental underlying belief that I'm not worthy enough to accept that or to receive that. I don't deserve that. I'm not good enough. And that's not their voice. That's their dad's voice, their mum's voice, their teacher's voice, their bully's voice, their auntie's voice, their sibling's voice. It's not their voice.
Yeah.
No one comes into this world. I see my little, oh man, I try not to cry.
Oh.
I see my baby girl. She carries an innocence. She doesn't think she's not enough.
Yeah.
She picks whatever she picks up from her environment. And so if her environment is telling her or showing her she's not enough, she'll believe that.
Yeah.
She'll think that. She'll move through the world like that. Like that. We're not born thinking we're not enough or feeling we're not enough. We're born with this beautiful curiosity, and it's most of the time beaten out of us. Yeah. And not just physically and literally, but metaphorically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's so sweet too. Like everything that you're saying, it's so true. Like when you look at the innocence of a child, how has becoming a father impacted the work that you now do?
I can't say it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have words for it. What she means to me, and what her presence brings out in me as a father, as a husband, as a man, as a person that is, wanting to explore this world and any worlds beyond this world is unseen. Is I can't put words to it, and I usually have. I speak for a living, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I do every day. But the way that her presence is opening, and I'm choosing to meet that as best I can, is opening my heart and opening possibility and what's available to me in ways that I never thought would be before.
Yeah.
Is unexplainable. I think it's the emotions probably speak volumes compared to words that I would speak about it.
Yeah. Wow. That's really impactful. And what would you tell the version of you that was in the depressive, like the version of you before you went to that breath work, when you were on the path of suicide versus now when you're sitting here in this chair sharing the story? What would you tell your then self from what you now know?
Yeah, to really know, but not to know from an intellectual place, but to know with a full embodied visceral, I fucking know that it's all temporal. And it all, because the thought of me, and I've really examined this and I've reflected and been introspective and felt this extensively. The reason why so many of us as humans commit suicide and choose that path is because we firmly believe that the thing that we're going through is never going to stop.
Yeah.
It's just going to be like this forever. And the reality is, and I don't mean to demean anyone's problems or issues, the reality is that when we go to sleep at night, that thing is stopped. Like even if we're taking sleeping aid, like whether it's natural or pharmaceutical, pharmacological, and we sleep, like that pain that we're experiencing, it stopped for a few hours.
Yeah.
So it's temporal, but we don't believe it is. And so we take that path. And so I would really really do my best to reinforce that truth, that it really is, all of it's temporal. Even the joy, even all of it is just temporal. These are fleeting moments that how we interact with them really defines our growth and our maturity as humans.
Yeah.
If we're too attached to it and we're too attached to the desirable state, and that's the be all and end all, like the lust or the orgasm or the food or whatever it is, right? And by the way, I think I'm very much a materialist. I love physical pleasures. I love pursuing pleasure. I think I'm hedonistic, not in I would like to think not in an unhealthy way, but I love physical pleasure. I'm not against that. I'm not advocating for not, like a Buddhist approach to renunciation of that, so to speak. What I'm saying is that, the undesirable states of being that we experience, such as fear or loss or rejection and abandonment, they have something to teach us and show us as well. And we shouldn't be so quick to numb those parts of us and run away from them. Can we develop the fortitude and the resilience to actually meet those places and spaces as we would meet, hey, here, Rachel, here's $100 million, tax-free, take it.
Yeah.
And you'd be ecstatic. I would think you would be at least very happy.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Can we meet, sure. Can we meet those undesirable states? Maybe not with that level of ecstasis, but of, okay, let me be open to it at least,
And observe and allow. And
we don't do that because pausing is very difficult for us as a collective, generally speaking.
Yeah. 100%. That's the way our culture and society has been formed. Distraction, right?
And fast paced too.
Yeah,
quicker the better.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I don't know how old you are. You don't have to tell me, of course. But I remember the internet when it was with the modem, it would make those noises, right? And it was so fucking slow. And now, when my internet is just pausing for a minute, I lose my shit.
Yeah. That was me 2 days ago when my internet was dropping here. And I'm like, what the heck? We're so used to that quick.
It's getting faster too.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when it's not that, it's like even training myself to breathe in moments of that, like calling upon that, not just in my breathwork practice, but in my daily practice in every moment, like creating the space. And I notice when I'm not doing that, when I'm not breathing deeply, and how that affects my system, right? And the frustration and the feelings that come from it, and the work of not judging myself, even though I do this work so deeply.
Yeah, that part. I'm still kicking myself for a conversation. I'm literally still feeling guilty and I guess shame. I have to be honest. Like I just had a conversation not long ago, and it just got a little heated. Yeah, and I got reactive. And I mean, the details don't matter too much. I got defensive, I got reactive, I got protective, I raised my voice, I wasn't listening, I interrupted. I did all the fucking things that I teach people hey, probably best if you don't do this if you actually want connection with someone.
Yeah.
And I'm still kicking myself for it because, I should know better.
Yeah.
And this is the fallibility of being human. It's got to be okay to make mistakes. And I know where it comes from. And for me, internally, I'm very hard on myself because I was very hard. My parents, particularly my father, was very hard on me. So my environment was very hard on me. And again, like growing up a little on the streets too. And it wasn't because I was homeless or poverty per se, but just I didn't want to be at home. So I spent time on the streets, and I spent time with people that weren't very nice and were very rough and very violent, which is exactly what was happening at home, just in a different way.
Yeah.
And so, I had to learn to adapt and be hard in that way, but that's not necessarily my nature. But again, coming back to that is I'm hard on myself because I grew up in hardness.
Yeah.
And I'm still, I don't get it right all the time. I could have been calmer. I could have been in greater equanimity with that conversation. I could have been more curious and really feel, where is this person coming from? Like, what are they really feeling right now that they're coming at me like this? Like, I was in no physical threat. Like, I didn't have to react in that way. I could have been calm and more curious and more open, but I chose not to be, or at least parts of me chose not to be. And so I hear you when you say that. Like, I'm still holding some shame around that, especially, as we grow as adults and we think we're better than what we are. And I'm very open with, hey, I'm fucking not perfect. I still get angry. I'm still abrasive. I still can be very reactive. I can drop a spoon and lose my shit just like my dad did.
Yeah.
Like I can still be like that. I'm under no illusions, but just when I think, maybe I'm a little calmer than what I was.
Yeah.
Something comes in and says, no, maybe not quite yet.
Well, I acknowledge you for your honesty and vulnerability in sharing that. And I think it's really important. It's a value that I hold very dear to me on this show and the work that I do is like, I commit to being 100% just honest with you guys with where I'm at. And I have a saying that I don't expect myself to heal my way out of my humanness. And
I like it.
Yeah, it's like, because we can't at the end of the day. Like, we're always going to be human. Maybe we'll always have a part of ourselves that has that in us, right? But being able to recognize it, have awareness, have compassion, practice it, right? Like in those moments, that it's just another, opportunity to exercise what we teach. And we're not going to get it perfect. And I think it's so important for people listening to see people like yourself who have the success, who have the relationship, who from the outside might be comparing themselves, right? Like they have it all together. They understand. It's like, no, we get to have these conversations and really share like, listen, you know what? I did lose my shit. I did have a moment and I'm still human. And yet I do have a beautiful life. I do have a beautiful home and family and the success are all these things. And, those aren't mutually exclusive, that we can still be human and also be consistently growing. So I acknowledge you for sharing that. Yeah. And I definitely want to touch on today. I wanted to ask, we hear the phrase toxic masculinity all the time, and it's like a buzzword. And I wanted to hear what your take was on people using the term toxic masculinity and what you think of that.
Yeah, it just depends how it's used and depends on the intention behind it. A lot of what we say and do is really what's underneath, what's the come from. Right? And so we can use the term toxic masculinity because it's an unhealthy, unsustainable, extreme expression of a particular energetic. Right? But if we're going to use the term toxic masculinity, we have to use the term toxic femininity
100%.
Well. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I guess the general consensus or the majority consensus of how toxic masculinity is viewed is that men are inherently flawed. Like that's the association, and they're inherently bad or they're inherently toxic. Now, not everyone holds that view, of course. Sure. It's just that's just a dominant view.
Yeah.
And I disagree 100% with that.
I do too. And I've heard you say that, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because I think that there's this idea of like in the feminist movement, and then there's this toxic masculinity thing. And it's like, well, we all get to take 100% responsibility for our own self and also what it is that we're attracting. So I wanted to hear what your take was on like, how can we begin to bring, I think as a society personally, from what I feel we've gotten so far out of sync with nature and with masculine and feminine dynamics. And how do we begin to bring that back into balance in relationships and through society?
We live, I observe that we live in a very hypersensitive time and era and culture, particularly Western culture at the moment. And it's interesting, these conversations around, what is a man, what is a woman, gender, and they've really risen to very strong media attention the last probably year or two at the most, probably like the last 18 months maybe. And there's been a rolling movement towards that, and I'm wondering, what is that symbolic of our culture and our collective? Like, what's it saying about where we're at, where all of a sudden we're struggling to understand. Firstly, we're struggling to just give people respect and dignity, and we're struggling to do that for ourselves. And all sides of all different camps are really struggling with this. It appears to me, right? Where people that are saying, look, there's only binary gender, males and females only exist, and anything else is an identity. So for me, outside of any medical or biological outliers, for me it's pretty simple. There's male and there's female, right? Yeah. For me, and then anything else is identity. So you can identify how you want, but it's identity. It's not necessarily male and female per se, and man and woman. Now, if you want to be called something, sure, you can be called something, but to force that on someone else, there are so many complex conversations around this, right? Yeah. So I want to be careful we don't go down any rabbit holes. But one of the things that we can do, so firstly we have to tease out. So masculine, feminine is not mutually exclusive to male, female. Right. So if we take masculine, feminine, we just put it over here for a moment and we say masculine, feminine energetics are like two sides of the same coin, two wings of the same bird, right? It's part of being human. It's a dual human expression. And the contrast helps us understand each other, ourselves, and relationships in a more deeper and profound way. Mm-hmm. So step number one, let's just remove that and say all humans carry masculine, feminine energetics, regardless of how you identify. Right? Mm-hmm. Whether you identify as an elephant, whether you identify as a man, whether you identify as a woman, whether you have 13 pronouns. I'm not being facetious when I say that. Right. That in and of itself, though, is another conversation. So it's like, okay, well, what is underneath why you need to be identified as an animal or multiple pronouns? Sure. And, what's underneath that? Mm-hmm. And it's not a criticism or a judgment. It's like, what has happened to you?
It's curiosity. In
your life. Sure. Yeah, that's what's fueling that, right? Yeah. So that's an interesting just curiosity. So we take that away and we just tease it out and separate it for a moment. Then we can say, and Michaela Bohm does this quite well, you can say, well, let's not use masculine, feminine terms, just temporarily, right? Not to appease and placate people that are hypersensitive, but just to actually get a deeper understanding of this. So we can say masculine, doing, feminine, being. Yeah. Masculine, go, feminine, flow. Masculine, active, feminine, passive. Yeah. Right? Masculine, yang, feminine, yin. Old, like that's 2,000-3,000 years old, this concept of these energies that we have as humans, right? So now we start to tease out and we say, well, these energies that we have that dictate how we interact in relationship, how we share in intimacy, how we give and receive love, how we feel safe, also impact polarity, sexual dynamic magnetism. Yeah. Because if you've got two individuals that are very, say, strong or very adept in their being energy, who's leading? Who's taking? Who's being active? Who's taking charge? Who's being proactive? Who's grabbing? Who's bringing in closer? But they're both passive, or they're both just in this being and this flow. So it's a human thing. It's human qualities first, right? When we're assigning characteristics or qualities to masculine and feminine energetics, it's that. In our society, I think we place an overemphasis and an overvalue, generally speaking, on masculine energetics because we live in a world of doing and productivity and goal orientation and completion energy. And by the way, we need all that. Yeah. And that's necessary, but we place an overemphasis on it where we now devalue the feminine energy, the nurturing, the receiving. It's all about giving. It's all about doing. It's all about conquest. It's all about domination. Yeah. And if it's all about that, now we're imbalanced, right? And of course, when you're talking about toxic masculinity, if we were to talk more fairly about that, and respectfully about that, we're saying, okay, it's really a movement into shadow masculine. So oppression, control, subjugation, judgment. Now, if we were to say toxic femininity, we would say withholding, purposeful withholding. We would say manipulation.
Yeah.
We would say scorn. These are extreme versions of feminine nurturing and receiving and compassion and empathy. So I think if we can understand that, that can help us bridge the gap between the differences that we have, which are fucking necessary for us to thrive as a species.
Yeah.
We stop demonizing difference. We start celebrating it. We start acknowledging the sameness that we have. And we actually, I'm going to go back to demonizing and celebrating difference. We actually prioritize our differences because it's okay to be different.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have different views of the world and different perspectives that can actually match and melt into each other, especially in sexual polarity and intimacy and deep, connection with each other. So I'll pause there on that.
So good. I love it. I love it. I love this entire conversation. And I can just hear people listening to this episode like, yes, like I'm learning about the masculine and feminine. I'm learning about the energetics. And so if somebody is like, let's give an example. If someone's in a relationship, and I've heard this from plenty of people that I've worked with, it's like, say a woman's in a relationship with, say, her husband, and she feels like they had that spark at the beginning, they had all these things, and then it starts to dissipate, right? I think this can be really common, and you can please speak to this, where the woman all of a sudden feels like she's having to do everything, she's having to do all these things, but then also she's nagging, and then the man is shut down, and she wants him to step up, and she wants him to do more things. So I feel like we can see this dynamic happening where the guy shuts down, feels like he's being criticized all the time. She feels like she has to be because nothing's getting done. How do we begin to restore the actual balance and the polarity, and where she can feel loved and cherished, and he can actually feel trusted?
Yeah. So in the work that I teach and that Christine and I teach, we actually don't focus on the polarity first, because often what's going to be underneath that is unresolved wounds.
Sure.
Childhood wounds. And so the immediate answer or the immediate go-to for me is, let's get them as individuals and a couple, but as individuals doing their inner work and really looking at what's underneath all that. Like, what's your need to do? Like, what's your need to nag? Why are you shutting down? Why, if your wife is asking you for something, you're shutting down and you're not wanting to do it and you're wanting to cause friction? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Like, what's your movement away from being proactive and taking leadership in the relationship? Why do you feel this need that you can't trust that man? Your husband. Well, why can't you trust him? Like, what's underneath that? So let's do that inner work, particularly in a child work and somatic work, and then come together and do the work together before we can actually get into sexual polarity. Then we can talk about creating space. Then we can talk about injecting and infusing variety and novelty into the relationship, and spontaneity and excitement in the relationship that gets them connected again. But they have to feel safe in their own bodies and safe for themselves. Like, he needs to know that he's not going to be criticized and judged. Like, is that him, his mother playing out? Like, is he projecting his mother and he's thinking, oh, this is what mum used to do with me and I'll just shut down?
Yeah.
Because no one wants to fuck their mum.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So good.
Well, some people do, but very few.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, a healthy populace.
That's a different conversation. Different thing we need to help. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's so if we're unconsciously projecting that, that's going to be a problem.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
You've got to heal that. You got to heal that wound with your mum. That aggression you have, that repressed anger you've got to mum.
Yeah.
Deal with that shit.
So good. So good. And so different scenario. So say a woman has, going back to what we talked about before, attracted the same type of man, and she's ready. She's like, I want to call in the one. I want to call in the masculine man that wants to provide and protect. I don't want to be doing it all on my own anymore. And she's ready to call that in. And she knows that, she's doing the inner work. She's healing the things. She's creating the space. She's ready. Now, what can she shift to begin to give off that essence that is what she's available and ready for?
Yeah, practicing doing less and receiving more.
What does that look like?
So if she's really, really active in her work, in her business, in all the things that she's doing in the world, maybe just do a little less, like work a little less, have a little more play and fun.
Yeah.
Be in nature more, create a blank space in your calendar. And receive more is ask for help, or allow people to help you, or delegate. If you have, if you run your own business as a woman, as an entrepreneur, learn to just create physical space and be surrounded by beauty a lot more. So really, if you live by a beach, go to the ocean more, go to the forest, go to the mountains, just connect to nature more and receive that.
Yeah.
And also creating space in your world. Take yourself out on a date and pretend that your future partner is there with you. Create some space in your closet for your future partner.
Yeah.
Have an altar if that's part of your spiritual belief, and create a space for you to really draw that in, but actually create space in your world. If you're working 16 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, how are you going to actually nurture a relationship?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to happen. How are you going to have time and space for a relationship? You can, but is that the relationship you want? You just got to get really clear. Like, is that the relationship that I want? That I just see this person, maybe half a day a week, and maybe once during the week, and we have some sex and we have some late dinner, and then we're done. And then if that's the relationship you want, great. But if that's not what you're asking for, and you want something that carries maybe greater substance and greater intimacy, then you've got to make changes in your life that you haven't made before.
Yeah.
And it could be different for everyone, right? Yeah. There are some examples that I gave.
So good. That's so good. And I can hear those women right now even like, but I've got to do this and I've got to run this.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's one more thing. Thank you for saying that. Slowing down. Like, we've got to be slow. And I would say, very specific to this, I would add this as well, is allowing yourself to be led.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to be led in specific circumstances, maybe with family, with friends, and that means trusting. So if you really struggle trusting, that's a great area to work on with a coach, on yourself, learning to trust people more, that they've got your back and they can support you and they can help you.
Yeah.
That can be really useful as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing trust and surrender. Surrendering to allowing.
Can't surrender without trust.
Yeah. Oh, I love this so much. And you're speaking even to me as I'm thinking, because I'm thinking through like, oh, I'm in this whole space. And I shared earlier, I mean, I'm all about sharing just like you, like the real where I'm at. And I know that, eventually I will be ready to call that in. And I also know I'm in a space that I'm not available for it at the moment, but I can see even you speaking that right now. I'm like, oh, I could see even where I could create more space in my life and more.
You're not available, or you don't want to be available for it?
Such a good question. I've said I'm not available for it at the moment because I really do want to establish my mission. But then I go back and forth now hearing you. It's because I'm like, well, what is that in me that needs to create and do and all of that stuff? But I've had this like, I love that this turned into this like proving, almost like wanting to prove to myself that I've got me and I can create it and I can support myself so that I'm not, because before I had more of a, like, I felt like I wanted to be saved. Like that was my thing. And I uncovered that and realized like, oh, I need to like know that I've got me. And then as I'm going through that, then can I allow myself to surrender into. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I ask some questions?
Please.
Yeah. Was there a time in your life where you really, really needed support but didn't have it?
Yeah.
When was that?
When my father was killed in an accident when I was 16.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. And the podcast, they all know that's what was the first spark of what ended up me in this work. But I had 8 years of drug and alcohol abuse and then came out of that. And now I've been doing this work for 5 years and now sharing it. But I attracted partners that I, would say I had some toxic relationships, dynamics relationships where I could tell now on the outside of it, like I just wanted them to love me. I just wanted to be taken care of. And I can see that it was born out of that.
Yeah. Were you close with Dad prior to that?
Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, it's very, very clear to me that, you having a need, and I don't necessarily think it's completely unhealthy either, you having a need to, we can use the word prove to yourself that you can support yourself is maybe really important to you in this time in your life because you want to know that if something happens that is going to be either traumatic or very unseen, unforeseen, that you've got you, especially with the 8 years of, drug abuse as well, which is, a lot of inconsistency and unknown and
I lost
fear.
trust with my own self.
Of course.
So I'm building that again.
Yeah.
I'm building the integrity with myself.
Yeah.
I'm building my true foundation.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm not wanting to call in the same stuff. So, and I want to really like get super solid in all the things I'm creating and then know that I'm doing this work and then can call it in when I'm ready. So I'm also asking these questions for myself too, which is like so good.
Yeah, but it's also,
so I love it.
It's also you arriving at a place within yourself where when you are open, like really open to relationship again, that, and I don't think you have a fear of that. I think underneath there could be some, some unconscious tethers to, if I am in a healthy place and I create a beautiful partnership, will I maybe lose that? Like, will he die or will we break up? Or
for sure.
And so it's maybe spending some time with yourself, really coming to deeper connection with that part of you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's deep healing that happens in a relationship as well, right?
Right.
Like where that stuff comes
I know
up.
that will be my next layer and level.
It can only come up in a relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, there's not, and you mentioned something else as well around the proving energy. And I think that's an important point. Like if you're a woman that's wanting to call in a partner and you're still in this need to prove whatever it may be, your success, your worthiness, your validation, whatever, taking a step back from needing to prove is also very useful for getting you more into your feminine energetic, because that is a very masculine energetic. It's a very active doing energetic, right? Needing to prove.
Yeah, 100%. I can feel that I'm deeply in my masculine right now. And I wonder and I grapple with that. And I'm like, well, where's this balance? And then but I also ask myself, is there a time and place for where I'm in this building my foundation, building my structure, rebuilding my trust within myself for the very first time? I'm like really feeling into that. I'm sober. I'm like, all of these different things. And then do I welcome in that? So that's even why I asked the question, because it even came up within me of like, I could create space, but right now with all the things I'm building and the team I'm hiring, like the way this is scaling and where it's moving, it's required a certain level of doing for me to hold it. And so I don't know where that balance comes in yet. That's where I get to still explore and evolve. But
and just be open to it. Keep being open to it and maybe creating space in your own life for, it's not even being, but for doing to not be so prominent.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a day a week or a day a month or whatever it may look like.
I love
for
that.
You, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's just putting some structure around it, which is a masculine container, but that structure and container can help you then be free within the parameters of the container. Paradoxically, we create the container for ourselves and there's even more freedom, so to speak. Even though a container, sort of technically speaking, you're contained.
Right.
But you're technically not. You're just creating the parameters for that expression to come through.
Yeah, fully. Oh, I love this conversation. Yeah. This is great. Well, this turned into a coaching session, friends, for me. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, your gifts, your wisdom, your knowledge. Thanks for the mini coaching session that I just got right now, which is so fun for everyone to see. And I just really appreciate you. I appreciate,
of course,
you sharing your time and energy. So where can everyone find you?
Yeah, you can find me usually at my home because I work from home. Social media at Stefanos Sifandos. My website, stefanosifandos.com.
Beautiful.
All the details are there.
Great. Yeah. Well, we will have all of that in the show notes for you guys. Definitely check out, is it what do you call it?
Breathwork for the feminine.
Breathwork for the feminine.
It's on my website as well.
Perfect. Well, definitely check out all of the things. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And Stefanos, thank you for joining us. This was amazing. Ooh. And as always, like, subscribe, share, tag us if you loved this episode. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so glad that you're here. And if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to share this with a friend that you feel needs to hear it. And if you are really feeling the love and support for this show, this podcast thrives off of your listens and your reviews. So I would love if you could leave us an honest review. We would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, and it helps us get this podcast in the hands of more people and would mean so much to me to receive your support. So thank you.